Welcome to Talking Point from the Church's Fellowship for Psychical and Spiritual Studies.
I Saw a New Heaven, a study of visionary experiences in the light of modern scientific discoveries. Jean Dorricott. This episode first appeared as an article in the December 1986 edition of the Christian Parapsychologist Journal, and may reflect the language and attitudes of the time in which it was written. Responsibility for opinions expressed herein rests solely with the author, and such opinions must not be taken to represent those of the CFPSS. The relationship between mysticism and science has always been tenuous, but discoveries over the last decade will so improve our understanding that our attitude to visions must necessarily alter radically. As the field of mystical experience is so vast, I am limiting this study to hallucinatory events, i.e. those which take place in the mind of the beholder and cannot be observed by another person, and which include appearances in the outside world, mental visions, feelings of a comforting presence with inner wordless communications, ecstatic moments of unity with God and cosmic consciousness. Other related phenomena such as especially healings, stigmatization and inidia will not be considered because they are probably caused by different physical mechanisms, for example low-frequency electromagnetic fields or self-hypnosis. I shall draw chiefly from Christian experience and only briefly consider the evidence from other religions, and I shall assume readers are aware of biblical visions, Isaiah, Daniel, Acts, Revelation, the writings of mystics from Christian and other religions, and classificatory books such as The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, Graces of Interior Prayer by Auguste Poulin, and The Act of Creation by Arthur Koestler. Religious and secular visionary experience. Christianity has customarily followed two methods of approaching God. Within the Anglo-Catholic, Roman Catholic and Orthodox traditions, the life of the contemplative is considered higher than the active life. Everyone is called to some degree of mysticism in their private life of prayer and self-denial, and knowledgeable superiors guide the aspiring soul. There are many books on this topic such as those by Anthony Bloom, Thomas Merton, William Johnston, etc. Saint Teresa of Avila, in the 16th century, analyzed the states of inner consciousness with great clarity, and I shall use her classification of the three types of vision. There are those which are exterior, i.e. they appear to be actually happening in the outside world. Those which are imaginary or inner, which the percipient knows to be internal, analogous to deaf Beethoven, hearing his late quartets, and thirdly the intellectual, which is an inner feeling of communication and which Saint Teresa considered to be the most trustworthy. The actual content of the vision is interesting. Many are described in Father H. Thurston's book The Physical Phenomena of Mysticism, which carries the Pope's imprimatur. The most highly regarded visions are those of the Passion which culminate in receiving stigmata, as Saint Francis, and the spiritual marriage. One example of many is that of Saint Maria Maddalena de Pazzi, who received both visions and physical suffering. Saint Augustine wrote on her heart in Latin, "The Word was made flesh." After a few weeks she felt the anguish of crucifixion and received the stigmata. Later, as she wept during a vision of the world's sins, Saint Augustine and Saint Catherine came to comfort her. Finally Jesus appeared, crowned in thorns, and followed by Mary, who showed her a crown of dazzling light, saying, "This and more than this shall be your crown in heaven." 3 days afterwards Jesus and Mary visited her again, and Jesus took his heart from his breast and exchanged it with hers in a moment of indescribable ecstasy. She heard God himself say, "Bride of the only begotten Word, my Son, ask of me whatever thou wilt." This vision of the exchange of hearts is rare, but has also been recorded by a male saint. There are also out-of-the-body experiences where saints claim to have been transported to distant countries where they helped and guided the natives. All saints record tussles with the devil, which are further proofs of their holiness. Saint Teresa threw holy water over Satan, who disappeared. Saint Paul of the Cross was attacked by fearful animals, and Saint Catherine of Siena was awarded the Latin title translated, the Invincible Heroine, who battled and triumphed over the archfiend, in recognition of her services to mankind in overcoming his attacks. Lady Julian, in her Revelations of Divine Love, describes how her visions of blessedness alternated with periods of dryness and satanic attack, an important detail which will be considered later. Neither the Protestant nor the Orthodox traditions appear to rate such visions as highly as the Roman Catholics. The Orthodox pilgrim in the books translated by R.M. French warns expressly against inner visions, even veridical ones, and encourages us to seek the prayer of the heart, which is so full of delight that no tongue can tell of it. Usually the veracity of internal visions is not questioned, but it would appear they do not provide accurate information previously unknown to the percipient. Generally, the content is related to the opinions of the religious group. For instance, descriptions of the crucifixion correspond to popular representations of the time, showing Christ with wounds in his palms, and saints have received permanently malformed shoulders through assisting Christ carry the whole cross, not just the crosspiece as was customary in Roman crucifixions. The second method of approaching God is the traditional Protestant one, which arose during the attempts to purify the religion of Europe during the Reformation. While the Theologica Germanica, a book recommended by Luther, emphasizes we must renounce and forsake all things, and enter into the union with God, we are reminded that the necessities of life are important, though secondary. Mystical insights must be related to the group and mediated through contemplation on the Word in sermons, Bible study and public worship. From Luther's day to this, Protestantism recounts the outpouring of God's Spirit on groups of his faithful people. Well-known examples are to be found in the pamphlets written during the disturbances of the Civil War, the conversion tours of John Wesley, the dances and songs of early Shakers and Quakers, and the mass hysteria of revival groups in America in the 18th and 19th centuries, with their visions of heaven. Similar techniques of emotional arousal culminating in conversion are used by Billy Graham today with the encouragement of the main British churches. Most successful follow-up consists of introducing the newly reborn to charismatic groups, which recreate the joy and fellowship felt at the original conversion every Sunday by music and emotional language. Worshippers are aware of the working of the Holy Spirit during such meetings, and phenomena such as speaking with tongues or experiences of Christ's presence are approved, but meetings with saints or dead relatives are considered satanic delusions. The Bible becomes illuminated and is full of contemporary messages. States of perfection are reported, which are probably similar to those described by more solitary mystics as times of unity with the Godhead, and which caused John Wesley much puzzlement. While there is a strand of individual mysticism within the Protestant tradition, Charles Wesley's Come, O Thou Traveller Unknown, on the whole there is a repugnance for the non-social way enshrined in monastic practice, due to antipathies stemming from the Reformation. This is strongest within the evangelical churches. For instance, the Deo Gloria Trust, founded in 1965 with the aim of stimulating Christians to promote God's revelation through Christ in this materialistic age, expressly lists mysticism as one of those false religions which blind men's minds to true spiritual values. Some evangelicals include among the demonically deluded Socrates, Goethe, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Mark Twain, Tennyson and the Church's Fellowship for Psychic Studies, SIC. Outside the specifically Christian approach lies a vast field of related human experiences, and I will briefly consider 5 major areas. All other religions so far studied record states of psychic insights similar to those of Christianity, though expressed very differently. They all agree on moments of illumination, unity with a god or nirvana, and visions of the traditional gods or saints giving comfort or advice. There is no reason to suppose that there are any primitive religions lacking in these experiences, however expressed. Quotations of spiritual writings are readily available so that past and present mystics of all religions may be compared, and there are anthropological studies and frequent films on television of ritual songs and dances invoking the outpouring of God's Spirit on the worshippers, whose faces show similar ecstasy to those in charismatic churches. The field of mystical eroticism is of such great importance throughout the world that I need not give examples. In many religions, the relationship between religious and sexual emotional states is explicitly recognized. For example, some forms of Hinduism, and poets often use erotic language to describe spiritual conditions, for example the Song of Songs. At its best, romantic love awakens altruism and encourages the setting up of stable family groups. But we are all too aware that emotions may overwhelm our commitments to loyalty and responsibility, and that belief in a soulmate can be destructive of happiness. This is because in the lover's vision of unity, the spiritual beloved is a personification of his or her desires. The real physical beloved is quite otherwise, and once the highly emotional period is over, the two may find their basic personalities are incompatible. The position of the religious mystic is very different because there is no possibility of a physical God intruding in an unacceptable manner and destroying the mystic's illusions, and thus the disappointed lover often turns to the comforts of religious mysticism whose vision never fails. Thirdly, in the post-Christian Western world, new groups have arisen to give meaning to spiritual experiences which so many have received, but in a form unacceptable to the established churches. From White Witches and Druids to Leary's League for Spiritual Discovery Foundation with its ashrams and use of psychedelic chemicals in worship, the search to find life's deeper meaning goes on. Apparent lack of such events in non-religious groups, e.g. in the USSR, may indicate that they are either suppressed, or related in a form acceptable to the prevailing ideological system. Over the past 30 years we have learnt a great deal from the increasing use, and sometimes tragic abuse, of drugs which simulate spiritual experience. The plant-produced extracts, from poppy, hemp, certain mushrooms and cacti, have a long history of use in religious ceremonial for the awakening of the inner eye. The effects of the use of opium were clearly recorded 150 years ago by De Quincey, who describes feelings of tranquility mingled with beautiful visions, and the terrifying apparitions when withdrawal was attempted. Kenneth Leach gives accounts of the modern addict's awareness of heavenly bliss, so overwhelming that he or she would be happy to die while experiencing it. The effects of mescaline, a psychedelic drug, are related by Aldous Huxley. He was awed and terrified by a manifestation of the mysterium tremendum within everyday objects. Illumination included ego detachment and enlarged consciousness. Frank Lake, a Christian psychiatrist and another experimenter with mescaline, spoke of faceless bliss and identification with the source of being, so that the ego has no boundaries and frustrations. There are many other studies, but all warn of bad trips, which are similar to the horrors felt by embattled saints, and of the difficulty of ascertaining beforehand the likelihood of such unpleasant moments. Finally, we should not forget the inspiration of scientists, mathematicians, artists, and writers. Many have related times of vision, feelings of unity and transcendence, and sudden flashes of inspiration from an apparently outside source. See Arthur Koestler's Act of Creation. It would appear that the mystical experience is not confined to great saints of Christianity or other religions, but is widespread in different degrees and perceptions. Medical and scientific discoveries. Medical evidence appears to support the above conclusion, although we must be cautious in our interpretation, as obviously medical work is done on pathological cases. However, C.G. Jung took the view that the difference between the mystic and psychotic is that the latter is overwhelmed by their experience, but the mystic or creative artist can integrate it into their lives. I have already mentioned the use of drugs to gain spiritual knowledge, and there are also medicines used to reduce the terrifying hallucinations produced during mental illness. Certain medicines can produce hallucinations as side effects in a few patients, which disappear when the drug is withdrawn from use. Dopamine agonist drugs may induce visions in patients without any prehistory of mental disturbance. Epilepsy and brain tumors may produce hallucinatory effects. While obviously not all saints have suffered from such physical maladies, it has been suggested that both St. Paul's and St. Teresa's visions were due in part to mild epileptic seizures. Psychiatrists have long shown great interest in internal mental states since the early days of Freud and Jung. Sargent, who worked with the shocked war wounded after World War II, links battle neurosis with Pavlov's findings with dogs. A state can be induced where strong excitement of one small area of the brain causes inhibition in other parts of the higher nervous system. In this state, patients complain of receiving actual bodily assaults when they have not been touched, and hold conversations with people who are not present. They cannot describe their situation in ordinary language, and become highly suggestible and non-critical of ideas presented by those around them. These abnormal brain states can be reached by two methods: first by music and dancing combined with emotional excitement, or by stirring up of great fear and anger, as under battle conditions, and secondly by progressive relaxation of body and mind, leaving only a small part of the brain aroused and active. Obviously, these conclusions are closely related to the traditional ways of achieving unity with a God and of the state of mind of saints during ecstasy. It is also known that techniques of meditation lead to psychotic episodes in some people, especially those already receiving treatment for psychosis. During meditation, stress is caused to the body by altering the rate of breathing so that there is a buildup of harmful carbon dioxide in the blood. The states of ecstasy or trance, which may last from a moment to several days, have also been closely paralleled by certain forms of hysteria studied by Pierre Janet and Charcot at the Mental Hospital of Salpêtrière. These include loss of sensation or excess sensitivity, experienced by Saint Catherine, loss of use of part of the body, and claims to invisible animal attacks. Compare with Saint Paul of the Cross. Suggestibility is high and patients have produced bodily bruising without cause. The extraordinary events at Loudun, so vividly described by Huxley, show the amazing effects of suggestibility, though even in the 17th century, Jean Desanges, the prioress, records in her memoirs that she later realized she was convinced of her devil possession by the very exorcist sent to cure her. Earlier I mentioned the interesting visions of Lady Julian of Norwich, which appeared over a comparatively short period and seemed to conform to the violent mood swings of approaching breakdown and eventual physical collapse. We must now consider the scientifically based research done recently on visionary states. Three areas appear of great importance. The Religious Experience Research Unit of Manchester College, Oxford, has analysed many accounts of modem spiritual experiences. Some were sent to them after appeals through the media, and they have also done random surveys on various groups of people which would indicate that about half the population may have had such sensations. Recently, apparent after-death situations have been classified according to the type of vision. In these cases, not only internal visions were produced, but also those intellectual communications with a being of light which Saint Teresa valued most highly. There have been a few OBEs reported on such occasions which are veridical. This work backs up the conclusion reached in my earlier section. The second area is that of the study of the faint electrical impulses emitted by the brain, which can be measured in microvolts by an electroencephalograph, an EEG. The alpha wave appears to be the most significant for those studying mystical states. Only about 10% of persons in the USA, where most studies are done, do not produce any alpha waves at all. The rest of the population emit them when relaxing with the eyes shut, but Zen adepts can produce them with the eyes open. A high amplitude of alpha waves is also associated with the mystic condition. Interesting conclusions are that mystical and hypnotic states are different, and that the waves produced by Zen and yoga consciousness are also unalike. Finally, there is the study of the chemicals manufactured by the body, which are similar in composition to those plant-produced chemicals taken to increase spiritual awareness. Until recently, it was thought that the brain is an extremely complicated system of electrical circuits similar to a computer, but it is now known that nerve impulses do not pass directly from one cell to another but are transmitted by chemicals. Over 40 have been isolated in the mammalian brain at present, June 1985, and this number is likely to increase. Their importance is considerable. For example, dopamine loss is associated with Parkinson's disease and also appears to have some relationship to schizophrenia. The group of opioid peptides or brain opiates, for example the enkephalins and endorphins, are related chemically to opium and seem to modify pain messages received by the brain. High levels of enkephalins are received during periods of excess physical exertion, but these levels are reduced over the training period. Joggers have claimed feelings of euphoria and well-being after the initial weariness has passed, the second wind, and this may well be due to the effects of encephalin release. The experience of illumination of one's surroundings experienced by mescaline takers is due to the reaction of the tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, on receptors in the brain as yet unlocated. To date, no such cannabis-type chemical has been discovered in the brain, but this may merely be due to technical difficulties of dissolving THC in the test tube. We can reasonably assume that the states reported by mystics of well-being, radiant light and cosmic consciousness are caused by the physical interaction of certain chemicals within the brain. Conclusions. Having surveyed this vast field briefly, it is necessary to draw together the varied strands, and I would tentatively put forward the following ideas for consideration by other Christians, especially those who, like myself, have some personal experience of mystic states. First, we should consider the physical mechanism within the body responsible for the conditions in which mysticism can flourish. This appears to be the manufacture of certain brain chemicals in different proportions from normal, and is also related to the emittance of alpha waves. Alteration in the levels of brain chemicals occurs in three ways: externally by taking the appropriate drugs, or internally by using meditation techniques, or by stress, emotional such as love, despair, fear of approaching death, exhilaration, or physical such as excessive exertion, sickness, or fasting. These experiences will be of long or short duration depending on the severity of the chemical imbalance. Where this is severe, the body may take a while to return to normal, and violent swings between negative and positive hallucinations may occur. As visions are endemic throughout the world, we may assume that the likelihood of receiving them is more dependent on genetic makeup than an external gift from God. Some people may be physically unable to produce the appropriate level of brain chemical, while others can enter the mystic state with ease. The positive experiences themselves are so enjoyable and so highly valued by many societies that human beings will go through all sorts of physical and mental anguish to develop them, and this leads to my second consideration, the varying content of the vision. This must be due to differences of upbringing and life experience, for example, whether non-religious, Hindu, adolescent falling in love, etc. They are always related both to the subject's emotions, for example, the preponderance of spiritual marriages among the unmarried or unhappily married, and to the surrounding society, because of the high degree of susceptibility at such times. The mystic often sees him or herself as one who deeply understands society and becomes a prophet or spiritual leader due to this opening of the personality to surrounding influences. The strong approval given by the group to such visions as nirvana or spiritual marriage is itself the cause for the preponderance of such visions. It is well known that Jung's patients dreamed Jungian dreams, while Freud's had Freudian ones. The content is always related to the life of the beholder, and those which appear to be totally outside their experience come from forgotten memories, as with hypnotic regressions to supposed former lives. The more literate visionary will be able to relate the experiences more acceptably than the simple-minded, as witness Joan of Arc's sad story, for those like her must rely on interpretation, perhaps erroneous, by someone in authority. The feelings of unity with the Godhead or spiritual marriage are in fact a unifying process within the individual's subconscious, and provide a satisfactory resolution of problems in that individual's life. Differences in personality account for differences in the way messages are related. For instance, the mystic personalities are those with a deep sense of their own worth who achieve unity with a godlike being, their own transcendent ego figure, while the mediumistic personalities have lesser sense of individual value and so claim guidance from a lower spirit being. The underlying reason for positively and negatively orientated visions lies in our permanent battle over our inherited instincts. The individual has to see itself as center of its world, or it will cease to exist, and this necessary selfishness wars with the concept of altruism we share with other animals, but have enlarged through our ability to reason, discuss, and read. Meditation is a sorting process between these two powerful forces, which we tend to personalize as devils and angels, and the apparent selflessness of the mystical experience is unification with a much more powerful entity, the cosmos, or merging with non-being. That is, it is an increase, not a decrease in selfhood, related in a manner acceptable to the religious group. The validity of these experiences is not clear. They cannot prove there is a spiritual life after death, or even that there is a God or state of nirvana at all, since in those few which can be tested there is a high degree of falsity. For example, the claims of great humility by those who have apparently achieved spiritual unity with God are hardly valid. We have all of us met the hypocritical mystic who loves mankind very tenderly but cares little for his or her own family, or withdraws into contemplation of the divine when life becomes challenging. All such claims must therefore be judged by their practical fruits, as many religions recognize. Also, and perhaps most crucially, we should consider the Christian analysis of such states. Spiritual advisors often test the standing of a person's soul by the visions they recount. They are able to improve these by providing suitable Christian books, encouraging meditation on scripture and advising on methods of achieving the prayer of unity, but such improvements do not indicate the client is becoming nearer to God, merely that he or she is doing as instructed. The messages received are not necessarily from God, but are certainly from the subconscious. For example, an experience of the ineffable Comforter is due to a desire to return to the safety of childhood or the womb. I do not consider this desire necessarily due to inadequacy in the personality. It is a legitimate means of overcoming problems and can be useful. However, time for meditation should be curtailed where it leads to inaction or self-immersion in a mythical heavenly world. The effects of overindulgence in contemplation are very marked, especially where spiritual advisors have withdrawn from the world so frequently that they become unable to understand the problems of everyday living. I think this criticism may be leveled at the Buddhist and Hindu ideals of past centuries as well as at some forms of Christianity. Is it at all possible to prove that the otherworld experience of bliss after death is more than a vision of present desires? And are the beholders advanced souls or bodhisattvas? Surely some visionaries are so sure of their high spiritual status and so eager to enlighten the rest of us, that one can only hope heaven is not too closely crowded with such exalted beings. Finally, common sense would suggest that the visions of our secular age will only be partially related to Christian doctrine, and this in fact we find to be the case. Positive visions are feelings of unity with mankind or the life force, rather than with a member of the Trinity. Negative visions are of nuclear holocaust and evil doers, rather than battles with Satan and devils. So often Christians speak dismissively of such experiences, forgetting that they destroy their own case for the validity of their visions by such a reaction. And should we not listen with some humility to the non-Christian visionaries with their highly critical attitude towards the Christian desire of unity with the Godhead in the beatitude of heaven, radiating love and compassion to all creation for eternity? This sounds like the greatest ego trip of all time to those whose scientific and materialistic vision is of our close relationship with the matter of the universe, The recycling of our component parts once useful life is over, and the eventual probability of an immortality which will consist of recording all an individual's memories onto a compact disc. Such people utterly reject the Christian view of man as spiritually superior to the rest of creation, and this life as a testing ground for heaven. For many of us, torn between these contradictions, faith in Christian doctrine has become a step greater than that of the astronauts onto the moon. Our daily lives are based on the scientific discoveries of the past 200 years. We cannot live otherwise even if we wanted to, since verifiable facts are so much more reliable than the ideas of men 2,000 years ago. Yet we are told by church leaders that if we reject those ideas, we are not only disloyal to Christ, but we are not Christians at all. I had hoped when I began collecting material for this article that I would be able to relate scientific concepts to Christian beliefs in a meaningful way. But in all honesty, I cannot. And ultimately I must stand by today's truth, not by that of the men of Galilee so long ago and those who try to modernize their concepts. So I submit this summary for discussion by interested and thoughtful Christians who will, I hope, either be able to find logical flaws in my argument or submit other material which will produce answers to the serious problems raised for Christianity by modern discoveries such as that of the brain opiates.
You have been listening to Talking Point from the Church's Fellowship for Psychical and Spiritual Studies. To find out more, please visit www.churchesfellowship.co.uk.